Hello and welcome to the Life Together podcast, where we share in meaningful conversation about living for Christ and loving one another. Thanks for joining today, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Today I'm here with Roy Mason, who recently preached for us here at Lost River. So Roy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that we can do this today, and I said this before the lesson, but I really truly believe that you're one of the most passionate followers of Jesus that I've known, and throughout our friendship, I've seen your heart for evangelism, for sharing the gospel, for reaching the lost, and I want to start by asking, where does that passion for evangelism come from? Is it just like something that's just like naturally a part of just your DNA? It's like how you've always been? Is it something that you became convicted by at some point, or were there different like mentors that influenced it? Like, where did this passion come from for you?
Right. The first place that my mind goes is definitely normally conviction. I feel like conviction tends to be the strongest thing. I was sharing with the teens last night that I had a memory all the way back from like middle school where I realized what evangelism is. Probably like one of the first places I realized what evangelism looks like in my life or anybody's life, and that it's not as complicated as I thought it would be. I was on the bus hearing other people who had some type of belief in God talking about kind of the sectioning off of God that they were doing. I don't know how else to describe it besides them saying that they loved God, but there are certain parts of him that they almost just didn't accept. Like, okay, we love these parts of God, but this, I don't know how I feel about that, but I love God. And even in that situation, I knew there was some wisdom in the age of, like, even at that young age in middle school, I could turn around and say, hey, have you guys even just considered this to change their thinking? And so even from that point on, I always looked back at that situation, kind of thought, like, what if I had just said something? There's so many things I could have said, but like one small seed, there's one thing I could have planted that would have helped everybody and myself in that same situation. Back being a college student at FC, I think one form of evangelism for me, I don't even know if conviction is the right word to use there. I had a friend who was passionate about studying with Latter-day Saints. And he gave me that invitation to join him in terms of doing that. And so that was just something that I had never had the opportunity to do, and it was really excited to experience that. And so getting to sit down with people and see what their experience is like, definitely learn about someone else's different perspective when it comes to religion and things like that, was very eye-opening for me. And I think kind of put my foot in the door of having conversations with people, especially people that I didn't necessarily agree with. In that same time frame, that's when me and you got to go to Jamaica and do mission work there. And that one is similar but different, but definitely opening our eyes in terms of putting ourselves in a new situation and seeing how Christians in another part of the world experience things and what their life was like, what their worship experience was like. And that's a huge one, learning about different cultures and being in different situations to almost like literally from a different standing point to look at God and have a new understanding of God in that way. Was kind of similar in terms of talking to other people in that sense. But then more recently, I've been preaching up in Racine, Wisconsin, right outside of Milwaukee. Our congregation, Spring Street, was approaching the subject of outreach. And even as I was there teaching on the subject of outreach, I was convicted in the sense of realizing that I wasn't doing a lot of outreach myself. So again, I found myself being driven by this feeling of, again, conviction. This is something that I need to be doing, and I'm not doing it. So as of recent, my endeavors in terms of evangelism have been from a place of, again, gratitude. I know what God has done for me. I need to be telling other people about it, sharing it with other people, and not letting the fact that I may be green in this area stop me. It really is just getting out there and figuring it out. I think everybody has that experience for themselves. That's It's been a lot of things, but I feel like the one I always do come back to is conviction and being reminded like this is something I need to be doing. So,
Yeah. Well, and it's cool that you've had people and influences in your life who have reminded you of that, right?
yes.
We need kind of that constant prodding, that constant reminder, and and maybe not even necessarily specific like mentors, but situations that you've been in. I think it's interesting that you recall all the way back to you were in what year of high school when you remember that conversation with your friends about your their different beliefs about God and
Oh,
feeling convicted about
right.
that.
That was all the way back in middle school.
Okay, so all the way back in middle
Yeah.
school, like
Yeah.
already, right? There's that formation that's taking place, and that's like exciting. I think for young people to see that, like you're not. It's not like you reach a certain point in I don't know your 30s or 40s, and now you know enough to evangelize, to share the gospel. It's like you're being formed all the way from the earliest years of your life, and maybe evangelism doesn't necessarily look like an in-depth theological intellectual opening up of the scriptures for like a typical Bible study, but maybe it looks exactly like what you're saying about like just an interjection of truth in a loving compassionate way. And I remember kind of going back, I don't remember as much in like middle school, but I have a somewhat of a similar experience in high school where, and I've shared this with some people at Lost River, but my I'll make this somewhat brief. But my best friend in high school was a guy named Wyndon Carlisle, and he didn't grow up with a father, and that just led to some like challenging situations in his life growing up. And in junior high was when we met and really became friends, and then throughout high school was when our friendship really grew deeper roots. And of course, like even as a junior high kid, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like I want Wyndon to be saved, I want him to be a part of God's church and his people. But I never really thought of it as like sitting down and having a Bible study with him or anything like that. But over time, what happened was he just became like a part of our family, quite literally. Like he was just over all the time for dinner and came to church with us every now and then. And anyway, eventually, by the time that we graduated, he had still not come to Christ. But when I came back from FC my freshman year, we had a conversation till like 2 a.m, not even so much about, like, again, it wasn't really a Bible study. It was actually the whole conversation was about God's love.
Right.
And at 2 a.m, or close to 2 a.m, he just all of a sudden he was like, Jarrett, I know what I need to do. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? Like, do you need me to get you something? And he was like, I want to be baptized. I was like, dude, all right. Like,
Yeah.
but it's interesting again, like that starts all the way back in junior high when this friendship was formed. And so it's interesting to me to hear you talk about how that started back in junior high, and all these different experiences shape and form our understanding of evangelism and how we practice that. So yeah, that's really cool. And I also want to zoom in a little bit on the Jamaica trip,
Right.
because it sounds like for both of us that was a really formative experience. So let's just kind of like walk through that. I don't know how much time I want to like devote to it. I feel like we could do episodes
Talk all
on
day.
on Jamaica. But there was a group of it was about 10 to 12 of us.
Yeah, I think
went
that's
over
about
there in a going all through Jamaica, both in Mo Bay, kind of the city area, and then kind of the country area of Jamaica and Cave.
Right.
Just going all over the place in this 12 passenger bus, like just packed in. And So many things could be said about the trip. I mean, like the van rides themselves were just like amazing and
Yeah.
so spiritually uplifting. Like we would just like sing hymns like for a lot of the way
Yeah.
as we were driving around. Like it's just like such a cool atmosphere. But specifically, I don't know. I guess just what were some of we went there twice, so like back to back years in the winter for a week. And I know that we were talking about this, how the 2 years kind of blend together, and it's hard to like
Yeah.
keep them
Try to
straight.
separate what happened when.
Yeah, but in the first trip, like, what were some of the things that you remember from that, or maybe that you remember when that trip ended, the experiences that were just sticking with you so much, and the kind of things that when you got home, you were like, mom, dad, sister, whoever, like, oh, I got to tell you about this. Like, do you remember any of those like sticking points for you?
Yes, I think it was something that Miss Shannon actually pointed out to me, and it's something I never forgot. Again, it's in that area of us saying that you're going to somewhere else and you're changing your perspective. It was very easy to see when we got there. Something that actually surprised me is that normally I think when people think of Jamaica, they think of it as this vacation place, and there's a bunch of resorts, and it's really nice. And the place that we went were definitely not like resorts, right? It was easy to see that the lives that we lived were much more privileged than the lives that at least the Jamaican Christians that we were engaging with lived.
Yeah, which was really kind of one of the main reasons why we went. It was
Right.
it was kind of like largely a manual labor trip to help with, especially the women there, because there's a lot of single mothers, and so we went there and did a lot of like maintenance work. And I remember one of the things that we did was there was a woman who they literally did not have a roof over
Right.
their heads. They had like a concrete infrastructure walled in area that
Right.
they thought of as their home, but they didn't have a roof. And so yeah, I remember like that really stuck out to me, like, and I had so much joy there. And it was like anytime you didn't have a hammer in your hand or something, there was a little kid in your arms. It
Right.
was like constantly like, but I remember like it just hit me all of a sudden as I was holding one of those kids. Like, okay, this is an awesome experience for me. Like, this is what they live in.
Mm-hmm.
And I've told so many people, like, those are the happiest, most joyful Christians I have ever met.
Right.
So yeah, so that really stood out to me. But
That was the exact same place I was going, right? Because in my mind, I was saying other people, like if you're not going to Jamaica for a mission trip, people probably never see this side of Jamaica.
right.
And so they don't have that realization that this is, again, someone else's life and this
Yeah.
is real.
And it's crazy that that's only like 10 minutes from all the
It's
resorts.
right there,
Yeah,
yeah.
It's
We, like,
in their
started-
backyard. Yeah, if you look closely enough, you would probably see the slums from your hotel.
Right. We kind of started in probably a more wealthier area and
Yeah.
moved to one that
Yeah.
was not. But
Touristy. Yeah.
that was the thing I probably shared with my parents. I came back and talked to some of the congregations that supported me about the trip. And that was the thing that I reminded them, that was pointed out to me at first, actually, is that even though, and I don't think they were like oblivious to or ignorant of the situation that they lived in, they never complained. They were very content with what they had and with their lives. And I don't know if I think that was definitely something that they were talented in, or it's just a gift that they had that I probably don't. I don't think of myself as someone who's hard to please, but I definitely could be more of a content person.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Same.
it was from that change of perspective that
Mm-hmm.
we were there helping out the Jamaican Christians, but they were definitely teaching us a lot.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah. I remember one of the nights there was and I hate that I've forgotten so many of the names. It's been like 5 years now.
right,
And so
Wow.
I hate that I don't remember all the names, but I remember one of the first nights we were there was a man who had like just within like the past year been baptized. And it was like a he and all his household type scenario. I mean, it was like
Yes.
straight out of Acts, you know,
Right.
it's just like awesome story. And he had just like fully devoted himself to studying God's word. Like he was just on fire. And So much so that like he would work all day, come home. I think I remember it was like 8 p.m. And he would eat dinner real quick and then just study, just like dive into God's word, which is huge in a area where there are not spiritual leaders in large number, and
Right.
especially older male spiritual leaders. And he just poured himself into the word. And when they had all of us over for pizza, and all of a sudden, after we finished, he just stood up and started into this amazing like devotion, starting in Genesis and then just like wove through the Bible story all the way to Revelation. And it probably took, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, but he told it with so much like passion and vigor. Like he was just so
Yeah.
fired up about it. And then immediately after that was done, we broke out into the Jamaican hymns that they
Right.
sang. And no songbooks, just off the top of their head, and then all of us from
Yeah.
the States are just doing our best to like follow along, and that stood out to me so much. I was like, am I that devoted?
Right.
I just like, I felt like I learned so much from that instance. And then thereafter, I remember we sang the song. This is actually a familiar one that like to people here too. But the I Want to See
Mhm.
song, and I'm not going to sing it. I'll spare everyone from singing it. But like we named every person in that room.
Right.
Like, it was probably 30 plus people,
Mhm.
and we went through that song and named every person in that room. I want to see Roy there. I want to see Shannon there. I want to see whoever there. Praise the Lord.
Mhm.
When the gates all open wide, I want to sit at Jesus' side. I want to see Roy there. Praise the Lord. And we went through and named every single person. And that was just such an amazing experience. So I just learned so much from all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. So I think we've already touched on it, but this aspect of evangelism maybe not looking in the way we first picture it to be. And I think that is a huge reminder of that. But as we were talking, I turned to John chapter 1. I hope I'm not stepping on any toes by bringing this up, but it's this aspect of how Jesus at times evangelizes. I don't know. Sometimes I think of it as a debate in terms of winning people over, but I don't know if that's necessarily what we see from Jesus when he first interacts with his disciples, and when his disciples interact with each other. What he tells them is not like some big extravagant that he says essentially just come and see, come and experience it for yourself. And seems like when Philip comes to Nathanael, the same thing happens there.
Yeah.
Once he's experienced it himself, now he's going to someone else, and he says, for you to have a real understanding of this, you really just need to come and see yourself.
Right.
And so I feel like even in this moment, as we're describing Jamaica, we're like, how can you encompass that experience in like only so many words? And essentially, like with the conversations and interactions we're having with other people, it ends up being in this place of it's very much so in how you're living. And this man we're talking about from Jamaica, what he was pouring out was just what he'd been learning, how he was like really living. So your life, more than even necessarily like your knowledge, I feel like is a big aspect in terms of evangelism. And you just pour that out and share that to someone else. And you can only share your testimony, your experience so much. And you're just trying to encourage a person to come and experience it for themselves. Like amass that and gain that for yourself. Come and see.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's so simple, right? Sometimes I think our approach to evangelism we just overcomplicate it. And maybe the word itself is kind of what intimidates us. Like we equate the word evangelism with Bible study, and it's maybe hard to separate this from our mind. Not that it should be separated from God's word by any means, but that it is that simple. And I think that is, I think that helps me get to kind of the bottom line of that experience in Jamaica, how simple evangelism can be. Not so much that we even came over as exactly evangelists.
Right.
We witnessed how they were doing evangelism.
Right.
Without social media, without the fancy stuff, without the, comfy pews and all of that. Like, it was just so simple. It was like passionate people who were on fire for God, and their fire spread to other people.
Right.
It was just like, and it was that, come and see, come check this out.
Right.
And I remember the second year back, one of those churches in particular had grown quite a bit. So yeah, that was incredible to see. That passion for Jesus is contagious. You just got to let it out.
Yeah.
You got to have it yourself, and you got to let it out.
Yeah. So just like you're saying, of when we were sitting there and you're like, this is straight out of Acts, that reminds me, the specific context of even Jesus telling these people, like, come and see, it's John's disciples coming to him, and they ask him where he's staying, and he says, then come and see. So in that same sense, we're in this man's home, and this would have been how he did things in his home, and that's what we were getting to experience, and understanding that, like, it's not just, I think when I first say to a Christian, like, think about the aspect of talking to someone and saying, come and see, I think my mind first goes to, like, go to worship with me and come experience, like, the church, which I think is a big aspect of that. But more specifically, what Jesus is saying here, and what we experienced in Jamaica, it's come and see, like, my home, how I live, and how my family as a nuclear family is being used as, like, a tool by God.
Yeah.
That being a form of evangelism. That's really cool. It's very intimate as well, even more intimate in that sense.
Yeah, and it's just loving people.
Yes.
And I like how you put that, like, a God using this nuclear family as a tool for furthering the borders of his kingdom. And even just some of the language we use can sound, again, so intense and so overcomplicated, and I think it's good for us to use some of these words. Like, I think evangelism is a beautiful word, like being a good news bringer, an evangelist. Like, that's awesome. Or I guess even more specifically, it would be like a good newser. You're a good newser.
A good newser.
But how, like, I've thought about that a lot in terms of, okay, what does evangelism look like in a modern context? And, just imagining a scenario, like, what if instead of asking your coworker, do you want to have a Bible study with me? What if instead it was, hey, do you want to come to my house on Friday night to have dinner with my family? And it just so happens that your family either, perhaps maybe you have, like, after dinner you always have a Bible study together, or maybe it's not even a planned thing. It's just that you're the kind of family that is so passionate about Jesus that he just comes up. And that's how it was for me growing up. We never had, like, an official Bible study time, but every meal, like, the conversation somehow ended up on spiritual things, on Jesus. And it's like, what if instead of asking about the Bible study, you just had them over and you happen to be the kind of family that just talks about Jesus? What impact would that make on them? And then, not in a, to use this phrase carefully, not that you're being a Jesus freak in the way that some people would think of that, but people, I don't know, just people coming around the table with your family, they recognize that there's something different, and just sharing your life with them. That's what happened with my friend Wyndon, right? He just came, was a part of our family, was so deeply loved by all of us that over time, and heard so many conversations about Jesus that over time, it impacted him to the point that he was like, I want to give my whole life to this. And recently we've had someone here at Lost River. I won't, I guess, mention the name because maybe that's a story for them to share, but of that same exact scenario, just was so loved by so many people here and invited into a space of, like, just so warm and welcoming and hospitable that over time that grew and had a deeper impact on her until she gave her life to Christ. And it's just awesome how, and I remember thinking with everybody who was involved in that, how simple that was. It was like, I don't know if anyone involved was like, hey, let's have an intense Bible study and make sure you check all the right boxes before you even think, it was just like, we didn't even think about it. It was just love, like, just pour love into this person's life not not turning someone into a project, but just loving them like Christ loved and inviting them into that space. And so I
Yeah.
totally agree with that approach. I think it's so powerful, and it's, I think, much closer to what we see from Jesus and from the book of Acts and the New Testament.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I was trying to bring this out with the teens last night, and I didn't know if I did a good enough job of it in terms of just emphasizing in evangelism how much a relationship needs to be there and how much that's gained there. Even in terms of our introduction to people in Jamaica, it was really the gates or the doors were open to us of that from the relationship that other people already had. Like, Shannon Stinson, she had such a close relationship with these people already that it was easier for us to get to know these people. And it's just like seemed like a connection of relationships there.
Yeah.
But the heart of what builds a relationship really is just communication, right? And so that it's really having these discussions and having these conversations and wanting to create those relationships that like grow more and more. And so really when you're telling a person to come and see and like invite them into your home and experiencing these things, you're trying to get them to see you, to know more about you, but really see the relationship that you have with God in terms of your own life it's really deep. It's really intimate. And again, that there's that love there, like that. I don't know how else it always is going to be communicated that I want you to be a part of all of this, right? God loves me, so I love you. Like you're really pulling someone into something like really deep. Like I want you to be a part of this. Very personal as opposed to impersonal. That process.
And so that's so powerful and meaningful in a world that I think is desperately searching for belonging, for identity with some community of people. And I think that's so powerful. And I can't move on from Jamaica without at least mentioning Maxwell.
Yes.
He's the evangelist in Mo Bay, and I don't think I've ever met anyone who has given more of himself away physically, materially, financially, in every way, just spent himself to reach that city. And he's had such a profound impact in that community and especially in that church. And if there's one person from that trip that made the most significant impact on me and even my decision to think about preaching and go into ministry, it was Maxwell. Just such a inspiring person who I learned so much from in the 2 weeks that we got to spend there.
A big thing we learned from the Jamaicans is their devotion. Like you were saying about that man in his home, Maxwell was immediately someone who came to my mind as well, in the sense that he was like, I think his job, I think he drove a cab, right? And a lot of his funds went directly to the church. It was insane the number of how much he had given.
So all of that went to the church, and he used that sort of like busing business for evangelism. It's like, while I'm taking people around, I'm going to talk to them. And I've heard people here in the States do stuff like that with Uber. Like they'll become an Uber driver just to talk with people about the gospel, like, in however that conversation gets brought up. And maybe we think of that as an odd thing, but it's like there's all kinds of ways to say come and see, right? Come and see can take on any number of forms. And what you're asking people to come and see, while it's ultimately Christ, that can be any number of things. But that was just one way of him spending himself, using almost all, like you said, all the money that he made from this business, almost all going to the church, and then using that business to spread God's word. Just an amazing
aspect
example
of his life was a tool.
Well, I want to. I thought the lesson was just like awesome yesterday, and I know people will probably be listening to this podcast several weeks later. But the why of evangelism I thought was so powerful. right? Obedience with this great commission, this invitation that we get to participate in the greatest news ever to be shared, and what an awesome opportunity that is. Compassion, and it sounds like a lot of our conversation has kind of revolved around that, just loving people, moving toward them in compassion, and then gratitude.
Right.
And I especially loved your point about David, right? His experience of God's salvation is so deeply felt
Yeah.
that it just like bursts out in praise. And I think there's something so meaningful in that the deeper rooted we are in God's grace, the wider our branches of evangelism become, and the more fruit that bears. And even as I'm saying that, I'm realizing, I know so much of our conversation has focused now on Jamaica, but that's exactly what was going on there. People who were so deeply rooted in experientially feeling God's grace just showered over them, that their branches naturally just grow out in evangelism and in good works. And so, I mean, with everything in life, perhaps the most important part of evangelism is the why, the motivation, the impetus for what we do. But I also wanted to ask you, as we've talked some about this, what are some other ways that this, I don't know, takes on flesh, right? What does this look like? We talked about this idea of come and see. Let's just get really practical with that idea. What does it look like to tell others come and see, kind of in our modern context today?
For one, again, talking about coming from this place of conviction, maybe even someone hearing this may feel like maybe my life isn't in the place that it needs to be yet to comfortably tell somebody to come and see. But again, I keep hearing the whole Bible story as we talk about this. God comes and he's trying to invite people into his family. Then furthermore, we're trying to invite people into our family. So that's kind of where I started out, or at least where I felt like I was recently, is I felt like I had some growing to do, but my evangelism really took on this form of asking people to grow with me. Oftentimes I'm going to a coffee shop and trying to be disciplined about being in the Word and disciplined about reading my Bible, trying to get that Word known, or get that invitation out so people can join me in terms of doing that, to say, hey, let's grow together. That's kind of where those points about David came from, was me saying, I don't appreciate the Psalms enough, and I'm going to read the Psalms more. And then using apps to get out where I'm going to be and when I'm going to be reading, to say, hey, let's check out the Psalms together. I don't know this well enough. Maybe you don't know this well enough. Let's learn this together.
Which, by the way, what is the app that you use? Some people might be interested in.
Right. Yes. So I, to the suggestion of some of my friends, use the Meetup app.
Meetup. Okay.
It does cost a little bit of money to do that, but that is, and I guess that still touches on that subject of how we evangelize and what that looks like. The Meetup app is an app that people use to actively look for social events happening in their community. So it's on that app that I had actually two groups going. One that was called like Open Conversations Over Coffee or whatever. And I was saying, hey, anybody that wants to come out and just talk, please do. It can be about anything. I'd prefer it to be about the Bible, about God, and maybe, but it could be about anything if you just want to talk. That's what I was telling the teens. I'm nowadays just looking for people who are willing to have a discussion about things. And I fell off of it. And so when we came back to the subject of outreach at Spring Street, I was convicted in the sense of I started this and kind of just left it alone. I need to get back into this. So I got a second group to kind of have two fishing lines out there. But the other one was just called Bible reading. It was a suggestion of some friends that one of the best ways to read with people is put it out there as only a Bible reading and nothing more. Because there are some people who are curious about the Bible, but they're more intimidated by a Bible study or maybe going to a congregation or a worship service, but they just want to know what the Bible says. And so in that same sense, what does that look like? In my own experience, it's been a sense of asking people to grow with me, Maybe I don't know if I'm where I need to be, but I'm trying to get there actively. And I want you to join me in that journey. And then on the other hand, realizing that there are other people out there that are curious and trying to find the way to put as many feelers out to give them that invitation or give them that opportunity. It's actually interesting. On that app, people are able to join the group, and then they're able to tell you if they're going to go to the event. So I've made several events, but not that doesn't necessarily mean everybody has gone to them, but I know they see them. And honestly, there's been one woman who consistently comes out to things, but I am getting more and more people that still join the group. And coming into this new year, there's one lady who messaged me, and she said, I know I haven't been yet, but I see like these invitations that you're sending out, and one of these days I'm going to be there. And that was just very eye-opening to me in the sense of I'm trying to read my Bible more and be more disciplined. I'm not a morning person, but I'm fighting to be in terms of waking up in the morning and going to this coffee shop. And so in the same sense that I'm trying to grow and get better, someone else is out there and they're doing that as well. And they may not even be where I am in terms of actually getting up and going there in the morning, but they're trying to be. Yeah. And so there's that hope in terms of there's other people out there, whether I whether I feel like it is or not, or whether I see it or not. There are other people out there looking for that. And so there's two main things I felt like in terms of how does this look? How does that manifest? Is one, just you recognize that your spiritual walk is a journey of growth, and you're trying to get someone else a part of that. You're trying to welcome them into that, again, that relationship. Yeah. And then the other aspect is that I'm trying to work on is trying to find more ways of letting people see that. It really is a lot like fishing, like putting more lines in the water, or trying to cast more of a net into the water, trying to find different ways of communication, communicating to people what I'm doing and where I'm going to be and what I'm trying to have them be a part of. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does, right? I mean, I will make you fishers of men, right? That's exactly what Jesus says. Right. And I love how you put that, this idea of, to use our theme for the year, it's just asking people to grow together.
Grow together.
Yeah, I mean that's what it is, and that's such a awesome approach to that I think is so disarming and welcoming and inviting and unassuming, and loving. And as far as like practical things, I know of a group, a church that I think it was just for 1 month, and it was a smaller congregation. This might be hard to do at Lost River, but they arranged to have gift cards to like a local coffee shop to all of their members. And it was like $10. Like you have to, maybe it was $5, but you have to, would that gets like one drink at Starbucks? Maybe it was 10, I don't know. But it was like, you have to use this month to invite someone, maybe it's someone you know, maybe someone you don't know, to come and just have coffee with you and share their story.
Right.
It's like, that's a really cool concept. I don't know the results of that, but that, if nothing else, that at least like gets that motivation for people, and who knows what kind of seeds were planted from that. And maybe it doesn't look like that at Lost River or other places, but maybe it looks like families saying, yeah, I want to take more of an initiative on this. Like I'm convicted by it, not just because I feel like God is looking down on me because I don't know, I haven't been doing a good job or something, but because he wants me to participate in this. Right. He wants me to share in the furthering of his kingdom and his glory and manifesting that into the world. And as I see that, I want my family to be a part of this. And so maybe it's saying, okay, here's the budget for the month, and this money is only being used to have non-Christians over. Like something like that, you know, and again, everybody I think is gonna experience that come and see in a different way. You know, it may look like someone just randomly from the community using the Meetup app and showing up for coffee. Maybe it's someone at the grocery store who looks like they're having a bad day, and you say, "Hey, you might be having a bad day, but tomorrow night." A group of my friends are going to be having a dinner, would love for you to come. Or maybe for say like a stay-at-home mom or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's more difficult to say get out in the community and find those people and reach the lost. But maybe they're the ones who are like, but I can make I can make some mean soup,
Right.
like I can create that Edenic space for people to come into and for them to feel like they belong.
Right.
Like evangelism looks so different for different people, but it's just everyone recognizing that this is what we're a part of, that we're participating in, as Isaiah and Habakkuk says, the knowledge of the glory of the Lord covering the earth as the waters cover the sea.
Right.
Like that wave of grace has washed over us, and we're just channels that are bringing that to others. And there's any number of ways that can happen. So I just, well, this has been an awesome conversation. We got to get you to the airport here soon, but I want to close with this. Ever since I've known you, this has been your passion, and we've had several extensive conversations about this kind of thing. But as you look to the future, as unpredictable as that may be, what are some of the opportunities or like evangelistic works that you would like to be a part of, say, in could be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road? Just what are some aspirations that you have in being a part of that sea of God's glory that's going through all the earth?
Right. Okay. Well, again, I've been trying to think about ways that are more broad in terms of the invitation to give to people on the subject of studying together, reading the Bible, of growing together. Where I am right now, I think our congregation has a desire for people, more people my age, and it's one of those blaring, like I don't know if mistakes is the right word to use, but one of those places where we're like, we should be doing this in this specific area. There are 2 colleges right next to our congregation that would appeal to that specific age group. And I'm going to this coffee shop, but again, having this mindset of saying we should go to these schools and see if anybody's interested in joining us there. One of our members, even, his name's Tim. He's very involved with music, plays jazz at one of those colleges. So it's not even like it's a foreign space to us. We have members who are involved with this college. We should go there and see if anybody is, again, being interested in joining us in this journey of growth. And so that kind of has been something that's come to my mind in terms of, okay, that's probably what the next step of evangelism in this area looks like for me. It's kind of intimidating, honestly, but that should never really stop you. Again, it's figuring it out.
Right. And I'm sure the apostles on many occasions were pretty intimidated going throughout Asia Minor and all over the world. But
yeah. So, but again, it does look simple. That's been a huge thing for me in my life, is that oftentimes things looked a lot more simple, or were a lot more simple than they seem, or it works out best when I keep things simple. So I've heard of people doing as much as going to a library in a college and just reading, but having a sign of saying, like, join me in terms of reading, or if you have a question about the Bible, just don't be afraid to ask. Something like that, of getting those feelers out there and opening up that invitation even more. Something that we've talked about, and I'm surprised I didn't bring it up in the podcast already, is when I was in high school, right, I studied Chinese for like 4 years, and I loved it, and I by far was never like fluent, but I always wanted to be, and that's caused me actually to have a lot of conversations with members at Lost River, with Darrell and with Heidi, in terms of what would that look like. If I don't know how that would happen or when that would happen, that's something I would love to do. Is I always thought it'd be cool to go over there and kind of like the experience in Jamaica, get to know Christians over there, have conversations with them, and get more of a culture change, more of a perspective change in that sense. When I told Heidi and like Jenny that I was like, I studied this language in high school, I was afraid too, because I immediately assumed they'd ask me to start saying something. Oh, go ahead and say something to us in Chinese. I really didn't want to. But that's another thing that in the coming years I feel like might be a possibility. And I don't even think that would be it. I'm sure Jamaica kind of came out of nowhere for us. So I imagine that there are other opportunities, other places that I could go, that other Christians could go, that whether it's in America, whether it's out of it, to say, hey, let me change my perspective again. I'm hoping for that in the future. I imagine that'll happen in the future. But
Yeah. That's awesome. And yeah, we've had several conversations about that, whether it be the work in China or in other countries or here in the States, with different inner city works and things like that.
right.
And who knows what the future holds. But I know that God is going to use your passion to do so much in furthering His kingdom. And so thank you so much, Roy, for coming on
Thank
today.
you.
And I know we all loved having you here. I know the elders had such a great time getting dinner with you, and that everybody who got to meet you had such a good time. And I think everyone has felt motivated by the things that you shared. And so I'm praying for you, and I believe so much in what God is doing in you and through you. And I hope that we can do this again soon.
Yeah, me too. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I was glad to be here and make so many just new connections. It's been awesome.
All right. Well, I guess we'll go catch the plane now.
Right.